everyone, and welcome to the ALCTS webinar using LibGuides and Technical Services. I'm Eva Sorrell, a member of the ALCTS Continuing Education Committee, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Our presenter today is Jennifer Bazeley, Interim Head of Technical Services at Miami University Library in Oxford, Ohio. Jennifer has a BM and an MM in Viola Performance from the Eastman School of Music and an MLIS from Dominican University in Illinois. She has worked in technical services at the library in the Field Museum in Chicago, the Mason Public Library in Ohio, and the library at the Cincinnati Art Museum before starting at Miami University Library in 2009. Her presentation will discuss the process of creating, testing, and implementing a LibGuide as a way of communicating much-needed information between technical services and public services staff. A few things to keep in mind for today's presentation. Today's webinar does not have interactive chat capabilities. If you wish to comment on today's presentation using Twitter, you may use the hashtag you see on the screen. We will not be monitoring the Twitter feed. If you have questions for Jennifer, please type them into the question box on your screen, and she will answer them as time permits at the end of her presentation. Questions which remain unanswered while we were on the air will be answered offline and the answers sent to all attendees. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive an email with links to the recording, the presentation slides, and an evaluation within 2 days. Please take time to fill out the evaluation form since it will be used by the committee to plan future events. There may be a slight delay as I turn the presentation over to Jennifer.
Hi everyone, and thank you Eva for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk about using LibGuides in technical services. The presentation I'm giving today is loosely based on an article that was published in Library Resources and Technical Services in 2013. That article and our LibGuide started as a collaboration between myself and a former colleague of mine here at Miami, Becky Yos. We worked together on this LibGuide until she accepted a job at Grinnell College several years ago. Since then, I've maintained the guide with the support of tech services staff here at Miami. The guide has changed and evolved since the article was published, so some of what I talk about today might be different than what appeared in the article. Our Technical Services Department has sometimes struggled to communicate effectively with public services departments here in our library. As we have acquired ever-increasingly large numbers of electronic resources, we've been increasingly responsible for providing current information about those resources to our public services staff. So today I'll be talking about why we chose to use a LibGuide for this purpose and how we're using it. So a brief overview of what I'm going to talk about today. First, answering the question that everybody wants to know, why LibGuide? Then I'll talk just very briefly about Miami University and our library system here. I'll talk about some broad design considerations that we used when making our LibGuide. Then I'll go over the scope of our LibGuide. I'll talk about some tools that we set up for ourselves before we began. Then I'll talk about the actual current content and tools that we're using in the guide. And finally, I'll talk about some ways of assessing the LibGuide once you have it set up. So before I address the question, why LibGuide, I wanted to say a quick word about LibGuides version 1 and version 2. Miami actually migrated to version 2 last summer, and there have been some changes between the versions, but the functionality is still almost exactly the same. So the things that I'm talking about today can be done on either version 1 or version 2 of LibGuides. And finally, Miami subscribes only to LibGuides. We do not subscribe to the LibGuide CMS, which actually adds some extra functionality to LibGuides. And you might be able to use that to your advantage if you subscribe to the CMS at your institution. So, why LibGuide? In all honesty, probably the primary reason that we chose LibGuides was that we already subscribed to it here for our public services, and this essentially made it a no-cost solution, which was very appealing to us. But outside of that, there were a lot of other features that we liked. The ease of use, both on the administrative side and the public side, was very appealing. We needed a solution on the administrative side that could be maintained within our department, which meant a system that didn't require a specialized knowledge of coding or HTML. Our department, like many, has been shrinking for the last 5 years, So the ability to quickly train new staff who have no HTML experience and updating the guide was an essential feature for us. Although the guides are owned by a single LibGuides account holder, the ownership of the guide can be transferred to another LibGuides user. So in the event that I am hit by a bus or change jobs, our Tech Services LibGuide can easily be transferred to another librarian in Tech Services. On the public side of things, our librarians and staff were already really familiar with the public interface because they had been using it for several years. Also under ease of use is creating backups of your LibGuide. This is a simple process because LibGuides has built-in functionality that allows you to create an HTML backup of all your pages, as well as the option to export your LibGuides data in XML with just a few clicks. The flexibility of the LibGuide software is also really important. It can accommodate a lot of different types of content, including RSS feeds, widgets, graphics, links, and embedded documents and files. The content format and layout changes are very simple to make and can be done from any computer with an internet connection. Guides can be made public or private and can be password protected if necessary. Additionally, we like that the LibGuide can accommodate a large volume of information about our resources. Like everyone, we have access to an overwhelming number of resources through local and consortial purchases, and we felt that a LibGuide was a good way to present that huge volume of information in an organized and hierarchical way. The currency of information that LibGuides offers is also important. Because it accommodates RSS feeds and embedded documents, information that's displayed can be easily updated and kept current. Adding new content is also incredibly easy, and deleting or archiving old content is the same. A LibGuide also creates some efficiencies for our department. We're all familiar with the staff resources and resources that generate the most questions in our libraries. By posting these commonly requested questions and information on our guide, we receive fewer repeat emails and phone calls, and this in turn frees up the time of our Tech Services staff to do other important work. And last but not least, we saw it as a professional development opportunity. Our staff in technical services don't often get a chance to learn how to use software like LibGuides, so this was something that we wanted them to have. Just a few brief words about Miami University. As Eva said, we're in Oxford, Ohio, not in Florida. We're a large residential and primarily undergraduate school, and we do have a few graduate programs at the master's and doctoral levels. We have an FTE of around 17,500. Our main campus in Oxford has 4 libraries. Our main library is King Library, which is where technical services is housed, and we have an art and architecture library, a music library, and a science library. Our library is part of the OhioLink Consortium, which includes about 89 libraries across the state and provides us with access to a wide variety of e-resources purchased by the consortia. Our library staffing includes 37 full-time librarians and 43 paraprofessional staff. Of those staff, Technical Services has 4.5 full-time librarians, 6 paraprofessional staff, and 1 student worker. Our Technical Services Department is a centralized department and accommodates all of the libraries on our main campus. The department is responsible for things like acquisitions and cataloging for all formats and materials, and the oversight of the complete life cycle of e-resources, both at the local and consortial levels. We tried to keep in mind several broad design considerations, both when we first created the guide and in the years that we have been maintaining it. We want the guide to allow for dissemination of information, as well as be a means of two-way communication between tech and public services in order to solve problems. We create guide content with 2 distinct audiences in mind: those who work at public service points and do virtual reference, and librarians who are subject selectors that purchase library materials. We very consciously decided that this would not become a tool for managing the complete life cycle of our e-resources. We already had an e-resource management system that accomplished those tasks. The guide must be user-friendly and continue to be user-friendly on both the public and administrative sides. We did briefly discuss the idea of opening up our Tech Services Department wiki, where we house all of our processes and procedures, to the library staff, but we decided that the information and interface there was not user-friendly to anyone outside of the department. We also try to keep the guide simple and clean on the administrative side so that changes and updates are in Tech Services. And finally, the guide has to accommodate both static and dynamic information. We wanted the ability to provide information about projects, procedures, and problems related to materials in a variety of formats. We wanted a tool that could accommodate both static information that is likely to remain useful for a long time, as well as dynamic information to provide real-time updates for ongoing projects and changing resources. In deciding on the scope of information to include, we looked at both the types of information that our department regularly provided to external departments, as well as the types of information that were most frequently asked for by external departments. In every institution, there are always frequently asked questions that you get over and over again, and those questions helped us to create priorities when we were creating the scope of our LibGuide. Because the guide has been around for about 4 years, it has changed and evolved significantly, and that's based both on feedback from staff as well as looking at our LibGuides usage statistics to see what is and isn't being accessed. At the present time, the scope of our guide includes 6 areas. We have current contact information for our departmental staff. We provide news and updates from our vendors. We have a place to request ILS lists from our III Sierra ILS. We have a problem reporting page. We provide general information about acquisitions, serials, and e-resources. These are often categorized by local versus consortial purchases, which is an area of confusion for many of the staff. We offer e-resource usage statistics and library tools and software information for tools like EasyProxy, our link resolver, and our discovery service. So before we began, we had set up several departmental accounts and tools, which ended up being really helpful to use within LibGuides. We started with a departmental Google account. In that Google account, we use Google Docs and Spreadsheets, Gmail, and the calendar. The Google Docs and Spreadsheets have been very powerful tools for us. They can be shared with one or many people. They can be view-only, or you can allow others to edit them. And they can be embedded using a really simple bit of HTML that Google provides for you. We also set up a departmental WordPress account using our departmental Gmail address. We use a WordPress blog with a very simple theme to aggregate our news and updates in order to generate RSS feeds for the guide. I'll talk about this in more depth later. A free WordPress account gives you more than enough storage to hold these blog posts. The free account allows for over 3,000 megabytes, and we've used only 8 megabytes, which includes over 1,000 blog posts as well as some graphics. So there's no worry about running out of storage space. We also use a tool called Yahoo Pipes, which is a composition tool that aggregates and mashes up content that you find on the web. We use it to combine multiple RSS feeds into one feed, and I'll talk about that in more depth as well. We also make heavy use of Jing, which is a free screen capture software that is easy to install. It's very handy for creating screenshots for the LibGuide pages that require illustrations rather than a textual description of something. And finally, a few notes about your LibGuide setup. As far as LibGuide's admin privileges are concerned, if it's possible, try to get those admin privileges for your own account. This allows you more flexibility in updating the content and also gives you the ability to set up new accounts in LibGuides if you're looking at delegating LibGuides updates to staff in your department. And finally, we created a LibGuide sandbox. We found that having a separate guide, or even just a hidden page on an existing guide, to use for testing features, functionality, and content has remained really helpful for as long as we've maintained this guide. It's also useful for saving things that you want to implement in the future that maybe aren't ready for prime time yet. So this is just a screenshot of our departmental Google Drive. Here we store e-resource usage statistics, gifts and donations, tracking, embedded forms and response spreadsheets, and a variety of other e-resource and serials lists. We share the password for this departmental Google Drive with our tech services staff who do the updating. And since moving to Google Apps for Education in 2013, we can now share this drive with anyone that has a Miami University unique ID and password. If you feel worried about losing your data because this is a sort of cloud storage solution, you can download the Google Drive desktop application, which backs up the data in your Google Drive onto the hard drive of the computer or computers in your department. As far as storage space is concerned, we've only used 5% of the available space that Google allots us over this last 4 years, and we have upwards of 80 or 100 large spreadsheets. So we're not worried about running out of space in the free Google account. So this is a list of the current tabs and tools that we're using in our LibGuide. I'm not going to discuss every single page of the guide in the slides following because we would be here until 10 o'clock tonight, but I'll be showcasing those that feature external tools or those that illustrate a page being used for a unique or special purpose. So this is the home page of our Tech Services LibGuide, and we have made our guide a private LibGuide, which means it doesn't display on our public-facing LibGuides interface, and it's not indexed by search engines. It's accessible only if you have the link. We put that link in our password-protected staff areas on our website and in emails that we send to staff. We like to keep the home page short and sweet. Last summer when we did our migration to version 2, we implemented some new in-house standards across the board to keep the home pages of all of our guides simple and clean. We provide a table of contents, which are just quick links to each of the tabs across the top. We also try to include librarian profile boxes so that staff know who is responsible for the content on a page and can easily contact that person. This is a who's who page for our department. While the library has a staff directory on its website, which includes everyone's department names and titles, it's often difficult to know who to contact in our department based on that information. Senior library technician is not as descriptive as, say, art and architecture librarian. Additionally, because our tech services staff don't work at any public service points, they're not always well known by the other staff in library departments. We chose the items in the Have Questions About box on the left based on the questions we most regularly receive from outside the department. Our intention is that the page will direct staff with specific questions to the appropriate contact. If possible, we also try to provide more than one contact for each issue, although as our department shrinks over the years, we've seen the list shrink as well. This is our News and Updates page. This page uses a variety of different tools to aggregate information from different sources all in one place. The links in these boxes take the user to an external blog where they can read the entire post. Hovering over a link, which you can see on the left side where it says Description, displays a preview of the text in the post. In the right column, we have an RSS feed from our Ohio Link blog called OTEC. They maintain a blog that publishes news and notes of interest to the consortia, and the RSS feed on that blog is what creates the OTEC blog box you see on the right. Inserting an RSS feed into a LibGuides box is super easy. You select Add Reorder, you choose your RSS feed, and you paste the link into the feed URL box. LibGuides lets you decide how many items you want to display in the box at a time, and you also have the option of pushing your user through your proxy server, which is useful for the type of feed you see on the bottom box called Recent LIS Articles. When I first started at Miami several years ago, we were still doing some physical routing of professional journal issues to library staff. That physical system was replaced by the LIS Articles box on this page. The box is generated by creating RSS alerts for peer-reviewed LIS titles that are available to us via EBSCOhost. We then aggregate those RSS alerts using the Yahoo Pipes software that I mentioned earlier. As I said, Pipes is a tool that mashes up content from around the web. It can be used for a wide variety of purposes, but we're only using it here to mash together these RSS alerts into a single feed. Using Yahoo Pipes is free and only requires that you have a Yahoo account set up. The two boxes in the left column are also both generated by RSS feeds. These feeds come out of a WordPress blog that the Tech Services Department has set up, and I'll talk more about the blog in a moment. The top box is e-resource updates. That includes information about changes to vendor or publisher sites, vendor site maintenance and downtime info, and anything related to library-owned or subscribed resources. The e-resource trials box displays information about trials that we've set up throughout the year. We used to send all staff emails out each time someone requested a trial, but those emails tended to get lost in staff inboxes. But by aggregating the trials here, staff don't have to dig through their emails to find the login details for our trials. This is a view of our Technical Services WordPress blog. This is where we update or generate our e-resource updates and trial RSS feeds. You're probably thinking that this is way too labor-intensive, but it's actually pretty simple once you get it set up. We used our Tech Services Gmail account to create a free WordPress account and blog, and we implemented a really simple theme, as you can see. We have a feature in WordPress called Post by Email. If you go into your WordPress dashboard under My Blogs, you can tell WordPress to generate a unique email address that goes to your blog. Once that's set up, you can then send a blog post from your email inbox right into your blog with no sign-in to WordPress being required. As you already know, the majority of updates that we get about e-resources come through our email. So when I or one of my colleagues gets an email about an e-resource update or trial, we forward that email to our unique WordPress email address. The WordPress email system also allows you to add categories and tags to your blog posts right inside the email, which allows me to sort the posts into categories without ever having to go into the blog. The categories that we use appear on the right side under the Topics section. While WordPress blogs are generally public-facing and indexed by search engines, WordPress has a feature called Discourage Search Engine Indexing, which does a good job at keeping this content out of search engines. So if you're concerned about sensitive information, like login credentials for a trial, you can turn this feature on. So far, we haven't had any issues with our blog content being discovered or abused by the public. Additionally, a free WordPress account gives you quite a bit of storage to hold blog posts. As I mentioned earlier, the free account allows for over 3,000 megabytes, of which we have only used 8 so far. This is our Report Problems page and is probably one of the most consistently used pages that we have. Here we provide links to forms for reporting e-resource access problems that occur both at the local and consortial level, as well as a way to report catalog errors. In the bottom box, we've also added links to resources for a sort of self-help troubleshooting, things like a link to see whether an e-resource is currently set up to work off campus, a link to downloading the university's VPN software, and a link to EBSCO system alerts. We've tried to keep the page as simple and clean as possible, which is why we have links to forms here rather than embedding the forms themselves. The first link in the Report Problems box is the e-resources access problem form, which is heavily used and is also a little bit too large to be embedded in the page, which is why it's linked. This is a view of our e-resources access problem form, and clicking on the link takes the user into our simple Google form interface. The form is intended to gather all of the information needed to begin troubleshooting an e-resource access problem. Obviously, some problems are too complex for a form, but the majority of the time we're able to begin troubleshooting from the submitted information. This type of Google form is really easy to create from within Google Drive. Once the form is created, you can generate a link to it by clicking on the blue Send Form button that shows in the upper right side of your Google form. Once a user submits this form, their submission goes into a responses spreadsheet that also resides in our departmental Google Drive. You also have the option of setting up a confirmation email that goes to the submitter to let them know that their form was received. The Form Notifications add-on from Google allows you to set up those email confirmations without having to write any additional script yourself. We've set up our responses spreadsheet, which is on the left, so that the submission of the form and the subsequent update of the spreadsheet triggers an email notification to our Tech Services Gmail account. Setting up a notification trigger in the Google spreadsheet is done by going to Notification Roles, which is under the Tools menu that you see when you have your spreadsheet open. In our Tech Services Gmail account, we've set up filters that forward these messages to the appropriate staff in our department, and you can see the filters on the right. Once the notification is triggered and goes into our departmental Gmail account, these filters forward the notification out to the several staff emails that you see in the filters. This is what our email notifications look like. It's short and simple. It doesn't allow for a lot of customization. But the important thing is that the email includes a link to the spreadsheet where we record the responses, which gives us one-click access to the problem report. This is a portion of our responses spreadsheet. The columns correspond to the questions that we asked in the form. The initials and notes column on the right are not part of the form, but are something that are filled out by whatever Tech Services staff takes on the problem. That person places their initials in the initials column to indicate that they're working on the issue. The problem details and solution, if we can find one, goes in the notes box for our future reference. For a while we made this spreadsheet available to librarians and staff who submitted their issues this way, but we discovered that they found it confusing rather than helpful. So instead, when a problem has been resolved, the tech services staff person emails the person who submitted the problem. This is our Request a List page, where we use an embedded Google form for those who want to request a list from our III Sierra ILS. Since this is a shorter form, it's ideal for embedding in a box on the guide. We used to take these requests primarily by exchanging a lot of back and forth emails, but we found that using this form shows requesters what criteria is available to them in Sierra and also forces them to specify what kind of info they want in their final spreadsheet. It saves a lot of time. Embedding Google Forms into LibGuides is really simple. When you create your Google form, instead of hitting the Send button to generate a link, you go to the File menu and choose Embed. All you do is copy your HTML code, then you go into LibGuides, and in your box, from the Add Reorder drop-down menu, you select Media Widget, and you paste the code that Google generated into that box. Like the problem reporting form, the submissions of this form also go into a Google spreadsheet, and when someone submits a request, an email notification is sent to the Gmail account. Filters in that account then forward the message to staff in our department. Again, tech services staff put their initials in an initials column to indicate who is creating the list, and then lists are emailed to the requester within 1 or 2 work days. And again, with this form, you have the option of using the Form Notifications add-on, which allows you to set up an automatic email confirmation to the submitter of the form. This is our General Acquisitions page. It's intended for librarians who are subject liaisons, and it features an embedded Google spreadsheet that lists the fund codes we use in Sierra, as well as the corresponding librarian liaison. Spreadsheets with multiple worksheets display really well in LibGuides boxes, and also allow you to make the most out of your real estate. As you can see, this spreadsheet has multiple worksheets: monographs, special collections, periodicals, and standing orders. Clicking on those links changes the view to that worksheet within the embedded box, rather than taking you out of LibGuides and into Google. When we use embedded spreadsheets in our boxes, we try to always include a View Download link in the same box, which is just above the embedded spreadsheet here, so that users have the option of viewing the whole spreadsheet in Google or downloading it into Excel in order to manipulate the data in some way. This is our eBrary ebook Patron-Driven Acquisitions page, which is another place that we use embedded spreadsheets. We participate in patron-driven acquisitions with several vendors, and we found that the LibGuide is a good place to aggregate PDA information, such as reports and also trigger parameters. On our eBrary PDA page, we use embedded Google spreadsheets to display both PDA trigger reports, which are updated weekly, and turnaway reports, which are updated quarterly. The updates of those spreadsheets takes place entirely in Google Drive, so this actual LibGuide page rarely has to be updated itself. This is our e-resource usage statistics page, and it's probably our most heavily visited page. Like most libraries in recent years, we've asked our librarians to make more and more decisions based on usage data, which has meant increased requests for that usage data. The top of this page notes some caveats and disclaimers because, as you know, usage data is far from consistent and full of exceptions. We try to include the kinds of details that people tend to forget, such as the fact that some vendors don't offer usage at all, how often we update reports, how spreadsheets open and display, and information about consortial statistics provided by OhioLink. We also offer some suggestions on determining what publisher or platform to look at for a specific title, as we've organized our reports by platform in most cases. And it's sometimes confusing for people to find a journal title if they don't know the publisher or vendor of that journal. And finally, because the majority of the reports we offer are counter reports, we have general information about the most current version of the counter standard so that users are able to look up which type of report they're looking at and what it means. This is especially useful for ebook reports since there isn't consistency among ebook vendors in choosing report BR1 and report BR2, which report on different types of ebook usage. This is the bottom of our e-resource usage statistics page, where we have links to all of our reports. We organize our usage statistics first by format, so we have a box for ebooks, one for databases, and one for e-journals. And then within those boxes, we organize them by vendor or name for single databases or standalone titles. We try to indicate the coverage years of the statistics that are in the report next to each entry so people know how many years they're looking at, as well as noting the counter report type if the vendor offers counter reports. Again, the type of report is important to note for ebooks. We also subscribe to the EBSCO usage consolidation software, and so we've been experimenting with creating aggregate reports there. These reports are posted here on our LibGuide for viewing and downloading, rather than giving all of our librarians access to the EBSCO software, which tends to be confusing. The setup of this page was somewhat labor-intensive, like all usage statistics are, but once it's set up, it only requires an update when a resource is canceled or a new one is added. One of our technical services staff members updates the usage stats in our Google Spreadsheets once a month, and that process is done entirely in Google Drive. The links in these boxes open the spreadsheets in Google Drive. Users can then view or download the spreadsheets once they're in Google Drive, but they can't edit them within Google. This is for their own safety as well as for the sanity of the tech services staff. This is our databases page, and is an example of where we frequently use the tool Jing, which is a screen capture software. As you probably know, for certain types of e-resource problems, it's often easier to display a screenshot rather than describing the problem in detail. This particular problem with journal citation reports became a frequent flyer in my email inbox, and it became more efficient to post the screenshot and then direct people to the guide than it was to answer this again. This page also answers frequently asked questions about databases that we get here. Things like what databases have we recently added and what databases have campus or user limits. We have some regional campuses here, and so there are some databases that are not accessible on those regional campuses. This is a question that people ask us a lot. As I mentioned before, we also use our LibGuide to present information about library tools and software to our staff. And this is an example of one of those library tools pages. Here we've used the screen capture software Jing to create a graphic of our link resolver menu. A number of years ago, we changed our link resolver from a consortial in-house product to a commercial one, which is EBSCO. This change brought with it a lot of questions about display issues, and that brought about the creation of this page. This is another example of something that's easier to show with a graphic than it is to describe in a textual way. We also have a page that talks about our Easy Proxy, and this is a somewhat recent addition to the LibGuide. One of the things that we discovered when we did our migration from LibGuides version 1 to version 2 last summer is that there's a whole lot of confusion among our staff surrounding how one uses the proxy prefix. This page was created to help address this problem, and it's aimed specifically at library staff. It addresses two of the most frequent problems that we see, which are one, that you can add the proxy prefix to almost any subscribed resource to enable off-campus access, and two, that only one instance of the proxy prefix is required at the front of a URL. We had discovered numerous links that have 3 proxy prefixes appended to them, which just sends users through an endless loop of logins. We also use our LibGuide as a sort of central place to post information about services that we've purchased or subscribed to. This is a page on browsing, and it's a subsection of our serials page. We have several other pages under the serials tab on projects and services. Our intention with pages like this is to aggregate information about the service or the product itself, where people can go for vendor support or to see the vendor knowledge base, and to accommodate any usage statistics for the product if they're available. Browsing is an app that you might be familiar with for browsing subscribed library resources on tablets. We've subscribed to it for a few years. Our faculty really like this app, and as a result, the public service points get a lot of questions about it. So we created a single place for library staff to find answers and information about commonly asked questions. We have similarly formatted pages like this for our Get It Now service, which is an article pay-per-view service, and for Canopy Streaming Video, where we're participating in a patron-driven acquisitions project. Another way that we've used our guide is to provide implementation information for new products to library staff. In 2012, we implemented the EBSCO Discovery Service, which we have branded as OneSearch. We use this page of the guide to gather useful links, but also to keep library staff informed on who was working on the project, what the timeline was for the project, and to compile a list of known issues and solutions. Although the implementation is now complete, the page remains in the guide and also includes information about usage statistics for the discovery layer, as well as information on how to build search boxes for the discovery layer. After several years of running our LibGuide, we decided to create an archived content page, which serves several purposes. First, this is where we retire e-resource updates or other content that we feel has exceeded its shelf life on the main guide pages. This allows us to keep the main pages shorter and simpler while still maintaining the content for those who might want to see it. Archiving information here also allows us to track changes over time and means we're less reliant on the institutional memory of whoever worked on these changes. Again, if someone who has worked on this gets hit by a bus, some of their institutional knowledge will still remain. And finally, it allows us to preserve any LibGuides usage statistics that were associated with these boxes in the event that we want to use that usage for reporting or for other purposes. Once our LibGuide had been up and running for a few months, we started accumulating usage statistics and looking at them. Looking at these usage stats has helped to guide us in updating the guide over the last 4 years. We look at the stats on specific pages to see if anyone is using them and to see how much they're using them. If we have a static page or asset that sees no use over a semester or over a year, we consider archiving or deleting it. This slide shows a screenshot of the page-level LibGuide stats as they are displayed in version 2. In the LibGuide stats area, which you can't see here, this data is also displayed in a graph, and both the data and the graph can be downloaded from LibGuides for use in reports or documents. Usage reports in LibGuides version 2 are generated for whatever period of time you select from the menu in increments of days, weeks, or months. Also note that usage of a LibGuide while a staff member is logged into their LibGuides account does not count towards these statistics. So work that tech services staff do while logged in doesn't artificially inflate the numbers you see here. We've also found that this data is useful for our librarian annual reports, for promotion and tenure documents, departmental statistics, and also to help justify the cost of a continued subscription to LibGuides, as well as justifying the use of our staff time in technical services. While the LibGuide statistics are informative, they're not as in-depth as you might like. In LibGuides version 2, Google Analytics is very easily integrated into your institution's account. And of course, it offers far more in-depth usage information than what SpringShare offers within the guides. We actually just turned on Google Analytics in our LibGuides in January of this year, so we don't have a lot of data to work with yet. What we do have so far looks promising and also corresponds to what we see in our LibGuide stats. This information allows us to drill down deeper into the usage on our guides and to see different kinds of usage. We plan on this more granular usage information to further refine content going forward. And this is the end of my presentation. This slide has the citation to our original article on using LibGuides in technical services for anyone that's interested, and my contact info is also here. Please feel free to contact me with questions that way. And I believe that we now have time for any audience questions.
So if you have questions for Jennifer, please type them into the question box. Jennifer, it looked like when you were, you had separate forms for reporting problems during regular business hours and after hours. Was that the case?
Yes, that is the case actually. Unfortunately, we do not have anybody. Our library is open 24/7, but our tech services department is not open 24/7. So when problems come up after hours, we have a different form that goes to a much broader collection of staff in the hopes that somebody will be able to answer that after hours.
Oh, okay, interesting. And how successful is that?
It's been pretty successful. It took a little while for people to catch on. It took a few weekends of not getting responses to the original form for people to realize that that I'm not open 24/7. But now that people understand how it works, people are pretty good about choosing the right form.
Oh, good. Okay. How long did it take to create these pages? It looks like a lot of work.
That's a good question. Well, it's hard to say how long it takes to create an individual page as they've sort of evolved over time. I would say when we first set up the guide, it was a matter of a few weeks to create all of the content. And that was after we had sat down and really carefully thought about what we were going to put on the guide. Rather than it being a sort of spontaneous impromptu thing, we had a sort of list of things that we wanted on the guide. And once we knew what those things were, it's just a matter of putting the content on the guide. And if you're familiar with the LibGuides interface, once you know how to add content, it's actually pretty quick to put it on there.
Okay. Are there different levels of authorizations for those who add content? Like some people can add content but cannot delete content?
On the LibGuides, in version 2, yes, there are several levels of privileges. So you have a regular status, you have an editor status, and an admin status. Basically, editor status allows you to update content and create content, but it doesn't always allow you to update content that someone else has created, which is why I suggest that you get the admin level privileges if you can. I don't know if you can limit users with accounts and stop stop them from deleting content or not. We have a very small department, so we have only 3 of us who have accounts that update this LibGuide, and thus far we haven't had a problem with anybody deleting anything they shouldn't have. LibGuides also throws up a big box with a big red X in it before you delete something to double check that you understand what you're doing. So.
Okay, so it's just the 3 of you that are maintaining the content on there?
Yeah, right now it's just myself and 1 other librarian and 1 paraprofessional staff who updates our usage statistics.
Are there other staff who maintain, because you said some of it's actually done, the updating is done through these other places like Google Docs, right?
Yeah, the updating of the Google Docs for the most part is done by myself and my colleague who is one of our e-resources librarians. Our paraprofessional staff member primarily updates the usage statistics within Google Docs, and she does that monthly, so it's become like a regular part of her job duties.
Okay, do you use other tools for other types of information and tech services, or is everything in the LibGuide?
We do use other tools. The LibGuide is primarily used for information that is useful for the public-facing staff. We use a PB Wiki to house all of our internal departmental procedures and workflows and processes. That wiki isn't particularly user-friendly on the public side, so instead of opening that up to everybody, we created the LibGuide for that purpose. We also make extensive use, as I said, of Google Drive, and even more extensive use since the university moved to Google Apps for Education a year or 2 ago. Most of our staff members in our department are pretty proficient now in using Google Spreadsheets and Google Docs and sharing them. Okay,
it looks like you're primarily using this for electronic resource information. Was it intentional not to include information about print or other physical items?
It was somewhat intentional. The majority of the questions that we get revolve around e-resource issues, and that's partly because of our consortial situation. It's often really hard to tell from the public side what is a locally purchased e-resource and what is a consortially purchased resource, and that affects a lot of budgeting decisions. We do have information about our print acquisitions, monographic print acquisitions. We have information about how to use YBP Gobi, which is something that our selectors use and have questions about pretty often. And we do actually also provide information about print serials. Whenever we do any sort of cancellation or reading project of our periodicals and our subscriptions, we do put that information on the guide as well under our serials tab.
Okay, how do students or other patrons get access to the form to report problems?
We actually don't make this LibGuide form available to students and patrons. This is primarily intended for library staff who are working at a service point. We do have a public-facing feedback form, which is what patrons and students are encouraged to use, and we have tech services staff who monitor that form as well. But to be honest, most of the problem reports from students and patrons end up at one of our reference desks, and we almost never get problem reports through that public-facing form.
Okay, is it possible to just make one tab on your guide public? It looked like using the proxy prefix or the browsing, those boxes might be useful for faculty as well when they're creating links on Blackboard or different things, and not just for library staff.
Yes. As far as making one tab public, with just the LibGuides basic subscription, I don't believe that you can do that. You can hide a tab, but I don't know that you can make just one tab public and the rest of the guide private. If you have the LibGuide CMS, which is a sort of step up from LibGuides, you may have more granular control over what is private and what is public. But the other thing to remember is that in LibGuides, it's really easy to reuse content. So for boxes like browsing and things that faculty might want to see on a public-facing guide, I encourage our library staff to reuse, to copy or to link to my boxes for their public-facing guides if they want to use that content.
Is there an easy way for people to see or to share, like reuse that content, or do they have to know it exists and know that it's on your page to be able to do that?
To some degree, they have to know that it's on the page, but in version 2 of LibGuides, when you go to create a new box, you have the option to copy an existing box, and when you choose that option, you can actually view a drop-down menu of all the different guides in your LibGuide system, and you can sort of drill down into those guides. Once you choose a guide, then you can see all of the boxes that are available in that guide, and you can choose from that list. So it's pretty easy to reuse existing content.
Okay. You mentioned that with the statistics that some of that was you guys were using for tenure and promotion. Is that mainly for the librarians and tech services who are putting that up, or is some of the content in there that other librarians are using as well?
It's primarily for the librarians in tech services who are going through the promotion and tenure process. We're encouraged to find metrics for the projects and other things that we work on, and so one of the metrics that I find relevant to my own professional report is, whether anyone's using my LibGuide, and so over time we've seen a lot more usage of it, which I consider to be a metric that supports the time that I spend working on the guide.
Okay, great. Do we have any other questions for Jennifer? Okay. Well, thank you, Jennifer, for your tips on using LibGuides as a way of communication and sharing information between technical services and public services staff. Thank you to all our attendees. We hope you found today's session useful. You will soon receive a short online evaluation form. Please take a few minutes to respond to the questions and return the form to us. Your comments are very valuable and help the ALCTS committee plan new continuing education offerings. Information about all ALCTS webinars can be found on the ALCTS homepage. Please check out our web courses, for which we have multiple sessions scheduled throughout the 2015 calendar year. Our newest web course, Fundamentals of Cataloging, has already sold out for the first 3 sessions, so sign up now for the fall sessions. Suggestions for webinars and other continuing educational opportunities are welcome at any time. Please contact any member of the ALCTS committee or submit a proposal for a webinar using the online form on the ALCTS webpage under Online Learning. I would like to thank Aping Chin Gaffey and Catherine Balick for providing technical support for today's webinar. The support they and their colleagues on the Technical Support Subcommittee provide make it possible for us to present these webinars smoothly. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, and we hope you will participate in other ALCTS for Continuing Education offerings again in the future.